Good evening and welcome to the WDSU News Hot Seat. I'm Travers Mackel. Tomorrow on Monday, the 2020 legislative session begins. They go in at noon and Governor John Bel Edwards gives a speech or a presentation. At 1 o'clock, he outlines his goals and vision of what he wants the legislature to do for this upcoming session. We're going to talk about the 2020 session. We have Dr. Ed Chervenak, political analyst extraordinaire, and we have Ryan Burney, longtime political insider, political operative right now, for lack of a better term, who has a consulting group based here in New Orleans. First off, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's talk about the 2020 session. First off, Governor John Bel Edwards has set up some priorities that he would like the legislature to key in on. What are some big goals for you? We'll start with you, Ryan. What are some big ticket items that you think lawmakers really have to address that the governor's backing?
Yeah, I think one of the big things to consider is will be his fifth year in office, and he doesn't have a big budget hole to fill or major crisis. So he'll go on offense, talk a lot about raising the minimum wage, ending the gender pay gap that has existed, and then investing in education, higher education, K-12 education, additional teacher pay raises, and really the issues that he's campaigned on from back in 2015, and hope to see some progress this year on really focusing on working families in the state of Louisiana.
Do you agree with that? And what do you think are some of the big ticket items as we move into the session?
Absolutely. Certainly tort reform is going to be a real big issue here. We're going to see a real tug of war between the trial lawyers and business, particularly lobby. Because there's this sense that insurance rates are extremely high here. We all pay very high car insurance rates. And so what Republicans want to do is make it harder for individuals to sue insurance companies, to sue businesses. The governor wants to basically hold insurance companies accountable for how they set these rates. So I think that's going to be one of the big divides that we're going to find in the legislature. And I think the other issue that is probably going to play a role is redistricting. That, this is a census year, and so this is going to be about drawing new districts, organizing voters into districts that affects how and, which people are elected to office.
Let's quickly talk redistricting, because our current Attorney General, Jeff Landry, was a congressman. The last time redistricted in 2010, his seat, if you will, for lack of a better term, got eaten up. His district got pulled apart, and he had to run. I believe it was either against Steve Scalise or Congressman Boustany back in the day, and he lost. He's now the Attorney General. It's water under the bridge. But are we going to lose a congressional seat, or is everything going to stay the same, or are these districts going to look different than what they do now?
I think one of the things why the census is so important, and you see a big public affairs push, not only from the governor in the state, but also the mayor here locally and parishes, is that count is going to be happening very soon. And so it's really important for people to be counted, not only for how many dollars we bring in from the federal government from various programs, but also how these districts are drawn. And so I think it's probably too soon to tell. Some people make prognostications nationally that things would be pretty even here in Louisiana, but House, Senate, local school board, every seat would have to be redistricted after the census is completed. And so it's really a multi-step process. It has to get court approval. It's not going to happen immediately this year, but it's certainly top of mind. There are obviously new committee leadership in House and Senate Government Affairs committees. Those are the committees that take the first step of drawing the maps. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how some of those discussions start to play out here later on.
I believe that the districts will be reconfigured because what we're witnessing is a population shift from northern Louisiana to southern Louisiana. And so there's a question of whether, in fact, northern Louisiana should get two districts. Right now the line is drawn vertically. Right. A lot of people are calling for it to be drawn horizontally so that there's one district in northern Louisiana. The other thing is that Republicans will not have the ability to gerrymander like they did the last time, because you have a Democratic governor who can veto any plan that he views as extreme. Yeah. And the legislature does not want to get into a tug of war with the governor, because if they can't come up with a plan, then it goes to the courts, and then all bets are off in terms of how the judges will draw those districts.
That's the second congressional district right now, which Congressman Richmond sits in, is one of the top 10 most gerrymandered districts in the country in terms of packing black vote into a
It
district.
goes all the way to Baton Rouge.
All the way
and then
along the
let's
river.
just point this out. The 5th district that Ralph Abraham, a former gubernatorial candidate, he's a Northeast Louisiana congressman, but people don't realize his district touches all of Washington and the bulk of northern Tangipahoa. People watching this right now in a meet are represented by Ralph Abraham, who lives in Monroe, Louisiana, in
Yes.
Northeast
And he's
Louisiana.
not running for re-election. There'll be a race this fall,
Right.
obviously, to determine that.
But let me talk about this, not to belabor this topic. There are a lot of Senate districts here in Metro New Orleans, including one that was represented by J.P. Morrell. It touched parts of Gentilly, East Bank, Jefferson Parish. It grabbed a slice of St. Bernard Parish. Do they really have to focus on maybe redrawing some of those districts? Because when you look at those, they're all over the map right now.
Drawing the districts is based on where the population is. And so they've got to get roughly equal populations in those districts within like a plus or minus 10% variance. So a lot of it is about where the population is, but a lot of it is about who's drawing the lines and what voters they want in their districts. So, gerrymandering is always going to be there. It's just, to what extent and what scope are you going to gerrymander?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, I think one of the things, too, is the importance of having senior leaders from the New Orleans metro area in the leadership in the legislature. And, they play a big role in kind of negotiating and mediating disputes between regions. We've lost a lot of senior leaders with term limits this past session, not in Orleans Parish, but in Jefferson, no more than Senator Alario. So I think it's going to be very interesting, not only on these issues, but budget and several others, to see how the legislature really acts with a likely more partisan, less congenial legislature. And that's hard to top given where it's been the past few years.
Let's talk tort reform. During the last election cycle, when the governor ran against Eddie Rispone, it almost seems like the word trial lawyer became a dirty term. It was trial lawyers, all this legal action. We live in a litigious environment. But that means auto insurance rates. To put it down in layman's terms, we pay a high premium for auto insurance. Can lawmakers work this out? Because it seems like they've tried to address this before. Former Rep, now State Senator Kirk Talbot had some bills that went up. They died in the session last year. Can the legislature really address this, or is this more talk than action?
Well, I think it depends on whether they're interested in following facts or they're trying to score political points. I mean, one of the challenges with now Senator Talbot's bill last year was that they had a study commission to look at insurance rates, and the insurance companies and the commission themselves found that tort reform is not a way to impact insurance rates. If you want to do lower insurance costs, you do things like make sure that they don't discriminate because of credit scores or discriminate because of gender. Right now it has more to do, insurance rates in Louisiana have more to do with the fact that we have one of the highest uninsured and underinsured populations in the country in terms of car insurance. And so there are a lot of things to do. You'll see Senator Jay Luneau and I believe State Rep Kyle Green from the West Bank, who's recently elected to represent a Billiot seat on the West Bank, introduced some bills more from the Democratic side that I'm sure the lobby and some of the business lobby will be against, that say, look, if we're going to we want to lower car insurance rates, but let's actually address the rates themselves and the ways that things are determined. Add more transparency so we can find out how they are. You could have right now in Louisiana a person with a bad driving record and DUI, but have good credit score and have a lower insurance rate than a female with a bad credit score but a perfect driving record. All not because of their driving records, but because of other factors that insurance companies use to determine rates. And so I think a lot will get lost in this debate, and it's certainly more about politics than facts. And so hopefully some of that will bear out this session.
Certainly Republicans have pushed this in previous legislative sessions, but now they are supermajority in the Senate and near supermajority in the House, and so they have the numbers to get this legislation passed. And if they can peel off a couple of Democrats, they could overturn a governor's veto. And so, basically they're repaying the people who put them in the office. They campaigned on this issue, and they won office on the basis of this issue, particularly, with the money from lobby. I mean, in fact, they've hired nearly 50 lobbyists just to make sure that tort reform gets through. So they're putting a lot of pressure on various points, various committees in the legislature. And so it is about certainly about scoring points. There is a question, and I agree with Ryan here, that there is a question of whether tort reform really leads to lower rates, or is it making the insurance companies more transparent?
You know, really quickly here, not to belabor this topic, but it's a good political hot button issue here. Have the committees been stacked to benefit this? The reason why I ask that for political insiders here is in years past, the committees were very balanced, where you had a good debate. But have they been stacked by Republicans to where what you just said, Ed, these bills have a real chance of getting through and really pushing what would be a Republican-based tort reform issue, given the fact it's a Republican majority?
You know, what we're really seeing is this power shift away from, you know, the Orleans Parish in the metro region towards Acadiana and Baton Rouge. You know, we're the most Democratic region in the state. Acadiana is the most Republican. I think they have the most committee chairs, in fact, coming out of Acadiana.
The Senate president is from
Acadiana. And so that's the very, very heavy Republican influence in both chambers. And so that's why I think they really think this is their opportunity to really push this issue and get it passed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, look, the legislature is decidedly more Republican than it has been in the past. And in fact, Republicans primaried, you know, with more conservative challengers this time for people who they didn't think passed certain litmus tests. So I think it's definitely going to be more partisan, more conservative, without a doubt. At the same time, Representative Clay Schexnayder, who is the new speaker, was elected because of a block of Democrats, and particularly led by the Legislative Black Caucus, picked a horse in him. And so I think, you know, they will have a lot of power in this session to determine, you know, the fate of many bills. And, you know, committee chairmanships, you know, we are definitely thinner here in the New Orleans metro region compared to past sessions. But, you know, it also gives an opportunity to build new leaders.
Really quickly, because we are running out of time, to put you on the spot, give me a topic in your mind that we're not talking about, something that's flying under radar. Just give me the topic really quickly in about 20 seconds.
Look, I think we're actually going to spend a lot of time in the legislative session talking about coronavirus.
Okay.
Other sessions are talking about it. They're adding money to budgets. There's public hearings, and I just think there's no way around it that's going to dominate much of the next few months.
Ed, give me something in 20 seconds that we may not be discussing here that's flying under radar.
I think there is a bill to do away with electing judges, that they would like to create a 15-member commission to appoint judges so that they're not out there raising money from trial lawyers and engaging in the same partisan politics we see from other elected officials.
All right. I wish we had more time. We could fill up the entire hour of this. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Dr. Ed Chervenak, Ryan Burney, we appreciate your time.